Yeah, back on the SportsMax Zone, we're discussing an issue within cricket, women's cricket, to be specific. Now, on March 21, that's almost 2 weeks ago, Starcom Network, a radio station in Barbados, reported that a former player of the West Indies women's team had leveled allegations of sexual assault experienced within the team's setup during the 2020 ICC T20 World Cup in Australia. That's 5 years ago. According to the article published on Starcom's website, the player, whose identity remains anonymous, eventually took refuge from what is being termed as prolonged sexual harassment in the team manager's quarters. Everil Betty Lewis, who held the manager's post at the time, has since supported the claims.
After Australia, and I had a scenario. One of the players, she was so traumatized that I had to actually bring her into my room, the manager's room, right, to see if I could get her settled and calm down and try to get herself in that mindset for the tournament. And that bothered me. So obviously, coming off what I saw, what was happening, and what we were faced with and what we had to deal with. I don't think the report ever made it to the board.
Now, despite Lewis' uncertainty regarding whether an official document outlining the incident was delivered to Cricket West Indies, current president Dr. Kishore Shallow has hinted that the board was familiar with the matter shortly following its occurrence.
I remember years ago, 2020 or 2019, when this matter was topical internally. President at the time, Ricky Skerritt, spoke with our HR team and ensured that this is planted in all contracts of everyone we engage at Cricket West Indies. So again, I repeat, there's a zero tolerance for any form of abuse in our organization.
Yeah, in a joint statement responding to the accusations, Cricket West Indies and the West Indies Players Association, WIPA, vowed to review all aspects of athlete safeguarding within Windies cricket. Still, there was no mention of a formal investigation into the apparent case of assault. Well, former Barbados player and sports psychologist Dr. Dawn Marie Armstrong now joins us via Zoom to assess the allegations, CWI's response, as well as the possibility that unwanted sexual advances were and still are common within West Indies women's cricket. Dr. Armstrong, thank you so much for joining us today on the SportsMax Zone. How are you doing? All right, seems as if we don't quite have Dr. Armstrong yet. Hopefully we'll get her shortly. All right, let's try again. Dr. Armstrong, how are you doing this afternoon? It's a pleasure to have you.
I'm well. How are you?
I am good. Before I get into the main aspects of this interview, I just want to get an understanding of your cricketing background. So can you detail for us?
Yes, I most definitely can. So I played, the highest level I played in the region was West Indies A. I played one game for the US against the USA in 2011. Unfortunately, that was the highest level that I went to at the regional level, but I played for Barbados and the Leeward Islands. Fortunately enough, my national record got me the opportunity to study in the UK, where I wrote my master's, and I played for Durham County in the 2011 season. Prior to that, I played in Hertfordshire, 2010. That was the first time I'd been to the UK. Played for Leewards in 2017, and then played in Scotland for the 2018 season, where I just decided to, pack it in. It was very cold.
Yeah.
And obviously at the time I had started the doctorate, so I just figured that my studies would have been my main focus. But you come to understand over the course of the evening why my journey was much more difficult than it should have been, particularly with respect to performing at the elite level, given the circumstances within the sport. So yeah, this is really, really interesting that something like this should come up at this time.
Yeah, so let me go right out and ask you the question. During your time playing at the regional level or playing for West Indies A, did you see anything? Is there any evidence from what you are aware of that harassment, sexual or otherwise, was prevalent within the game in the Caribbean?
I think what I will say, and it is fair to root, it would be remiss of me not to utilize the scientific evidence that's available to me to present the picture of the plight that troubles our sport. So within any environment where there is a minority, there is an element of otherness that comes into play. And when I say otherness, it is known that, cisgender women within certain sports are the other. And I do definitely feel as, when there are no proper safeguarding measures in place, and there is nothing in place to guarantee the protection of the other in any given sport, then you leave room for any forms of abuse, sexual, emotional, neglect, any forms of maltreatment. And I definitely do feel that this concept of otherness within sport is something that isn't very well explored within our culture specifically. And I think it leaves room for us to really start to understand how these views intersect and where persons who, share different identities, different orientations may be subject to abuse within sport.
Yeah. Did you ever feel uncomfortable while you played the game within the region?
I can tell you, I will safely say that a lot of the trouble that I had, believe it or not, was perpetuated by management. And it was a case where management, I think, allowed, a person like myself who is quite outspoken. I'm very firm in my beliefs. And, I guess when you are firm in your convictions about just generally what you wish to accomplish in the sport, what you wish to accomplish in life, I think people find a problem with that. So I think my trouble in the cricket came with the fact that, I had my goal set, I had my options. So obviously I've excelled academically. So there was always another option for me outside of the cricket. And I often feel that within our culture, again, there seems not to be very much space for the educated cricketer either. So the educated, outspoken cricketer who probably have other paths that they can take in life that may bring them equal success. And I do feel that element of difference is what caused management at the time to allow people to do as they like with me, did as they liked with me in terms of, Dawn, she's different. Oh, Dawn, she's too extra. Oh, Dawn, she's too outspoken. Oh, Dawn, she thinks she's so smart. And it is sad that in reflection, I did not understand then, what I went through. I don't think anyone should have been allowed to go through that. And it is tough to even articulate, but I will recall the last time I played for my country, which was 2011. I think I left in the summer to write my doctorate, to write my master's at the time. And yeah, I remember walking the beach. This would be at Coconut Court Hotel, walking the beach with the physio, just in tears, just crying, just breaking down because I overheard a conversation. Apparently I was earmarked for the West Indies team at the time, and I don't think my manager knew she was behind my room. And I overheard her telling the selector at the time, may he rest in peace, the chief selector, oh, don't pick her. She doesn't get along with the other girls, She's not friendly. She doesn't gel with the team. And all of this is within my earshot. And, I got called outside by this same chief selector, and he says, oh, Dawn Marie, this is a hard deal to blow, and we want to select you for the A team at this time. And at that point in time I was like, well, A team isn't bad. I was leaving to go and do my master's anyway, so I figured any type of regional first class stats, be it A or otherwise, would still cement me in a county team either way. And it's only in reflection I later learned that my own manager was trying to sabotage my playing, because I was othered within my team. And the boy, they went into my room. I think she allowed them to come into my room. They tossed my clothes aside. They chuck all my things away. She thinks she's all of that because she got a little 18 pick. I think they took the room key at the time because I was rooming with another teammate who was younger, and they gave her the key and took it away from me as a senior. And all of my things just got tossed around the room, And I remember going to play that 18 game and speaking to no one. I remember leaving Barbados to head to the UK and still not speaking to anyone. going to the UK to study, and I think I lashed out in one or two posts on Facebook, and I think the one or two posts on Facebook was what were used essentially to say, oh yeah, she definitely doesn't fit with the team. Look, she has a poor attitude. She's just not gelling with the girls. When truthfully, it was harassment. It was emotional abuse. No young female cricketer representing her country should not be walking the beach after 11 o'clock at night with a physio, asking why is she being treated this way, And I just felt like I'm getting away. Doesn't matter. I've got my studies, But naturally in the UK, 2012, I was playing well, did really well for my university, did really well for the county. I really was looking to head home to again come back and do what I could have done with the ball, and I wasn't given the chance to play for Barbados. Even when my name was mentioned for selection in 2017. So 5 years on, I played and I made myself available for selection. And they named me as a reserve. And I was like, no, I'm going to play for Leewards. That's how I play for Leewards. So well up to, 8 years ago, I was still very much active in the game, but still not welcomed within my own national setup. Because again, people felt like I was othered. Whatever people choose to take with that information and that otherness, because I accept that outside of sport in society, some of the young women may feel othered. And I definitely feel that perhaps the perpetuation of whatever abuse or whatever alleged abuse may be a result of that internalized oppression that they suffer. But the truth is that women who are other within sport suffer as well. And there's nothing to say that my suffering was any less than the suffering that another person may have endured. Suffering is suffering and abuse is abuse.
Yeah, hear you loud and clear. I am so interested, and I know you're on this show to talk about the current situation and the handling by Cricket West Indies, and I'm sure we'll get to that shortly. But I'm also interested to find out if your experience was any different when you played in England at Durham.
Honestly, it is so interesting the amount of respect people have for you as an individual. And I think that's why my work and the type of work that I do now brings me into this equity, diversity, and inclusion space, because people see you for you, whatever that may be. And I think, wherever I played in the UK, I was always the fastest bowler. So people always valued you for your talent. They always valued you for the fact that, how did you get from the Caribbean to be here? And it's just always a certain level of intrigue. And those girls and I have stayed connected, even though we're still very much connected. Within the social space, may not chat every day, but we still follow each other's lives. And I definitely do feel that having the opportunity to live outside of my country and to even experience another culture, and don't get me wrong, there are challenges wherever you go. Because in the UK, I am othered as well. In the UK, I'm considered an ethnic minority. In the UK, I constitute 4% of people that look like me. In Scotland, Black Caribbean people are less than 0.01%.
Is it that you're saying, Dr. Armstrong, that the otherness was dealt with better while you were in England than the otherness is dealt with in the Caribbean context?
I would say the otherness and the way that you relate to people, or the way that they relate to you, is much more built on a certain level of respect. I definitely don't feel that people feel entitled to dictate who you are, what you do, how you live outside of the Caribbean. So I've had my challenges, and I've spoken a lot about it, my challenges within racism, in my studies, within my fields of practice, being again within the 1%. So the concept of otherness has followed me throughout my life, within sport, within, my academic pursuits, within my profession. And I just feel that because I have always experienced that, I can relate to any person, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of, skin color, regardless of ability or disability. It is just something that, as long as you are placed as an outcast, all of us can relate.
Yeah, and as a sports psychologist now and seeing this story come to the forefront, can you talk to us now a bit about How situations like this, and I'm not only going to limit it to sexual abuse, as in this case, because you, clearly explained about the term otherness. So I think I'd rather use that one. Affects performance, because I'm thinking about a Windies women setup, right, where players are, they gather together in these different camps and everything to really work on their full potential, their capabilities. But then situations like this come to the forefront, and I know there must be some kind of psychological aspect of this where it hinders performance.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does when you are, and I could only speak within the context of cricket, when you're on the field and you're speaking to none of your teammates and you're trying to get your field set and you're asking the captain, well, could I have a fine leg, or could I have a sharp man, or could I have, a deep square? And it's like, gosh, is she even going to set the field so I can get a wicket? So naturally you feel as if, okay, I took a wicket, should I celebrate? Are we going to high five? Are we not going to high five? And it was so interesting because I had the worst season I ever had in my life in 2017, playing for the Leeward Islands. And the worst game I played was against Barbados. It was the worst. When I tell you I had the worst season, my stats were so terrible. I just wish they were taken out off of Crick Info. And I just could not get the ball onto the pitch. I just could not get the ball. Oh. And the coach of the Leeward Island team at the time would just tell me, well, Dawn, just focus. I even reached out to Rudy Webster, oddly enough, because he was, perpetuated for many years to be one that was very versed, in sports psychology. So here's the sports psychologist asking another sports psychologist, what's happening? I had the worst season. So I can tell you for a fact, if there was abuse indeed perpetuated at the World Cup level, or if there is abuse being perpetuated, at the regional level within this sport, it is definitely impacting performance. Any type of abuse will impact performance negatively.
Yeah, and a quick comment on how you feel about that press release that came from a joint press release from CWI and WIPA. And one of the things I also want to talk about is the fact that now the Windies women, and this was also, told to the public again by Dr. Kishore Shallow, that the ladies now share they have their own rooms, as opposed to before, where, they would have to have roommates and share with another person. But how did you interpret that press release? Was that good enough?
What I can say is that the press release should not have been given by the president. The press release should have been given by a safeguarding officer. And I think that's what I highlighted on Mason and Guest 2 weeks ago. I highlighted the fact, a week ago, that truthfully, CWA, along with all of the other regional bodies that make up the organization, all of the teams, I would dare say, across the Caribbean need to have appointed safeguarding officers, have a safeguarding policy in place, and actually have some person to enforce that policy. And not just enforcing the policy, but really persons should be retraining in their safeguarding every 12 months to ensure that if there are any contemporary issues that arise within the field, that we are equipped to deal with those safeguarding issues. Because the truth is that if the abuse was allegedly perpetuated in 2020, if the period of limitation is still 6 years in the country within which the young lady is situated, she could actually bring a case against Cricket West Indies, So we could all go back to the Nassar case in the US. Michigan State University has just about $500 million to pay, 75 million set aside for any 75 million set aside for any future victims that will come forward and say that they've been abused. So it's not just the lack of safeguarding causing this emotional abuse, and we'll give the girls these rooms and they'll have, the separate space. They all have to go and dine together. They have to train together. They have to do recreational activities together. So that concept of isolation as well. And it's funny because we've started having this discourse about loneliness in sport. So you could have your own room. You could be the best player on the team. You could be the most successful player on the team. But if you are lonely and isolated within the space where you should be sharing that camaraderie, the psychological impact of that is just as detrimental as if the person were being physically or sexually abused as well. So I think I give CWA a failing grade because as they are technically now an Olympic sport, the IOC has constituted that most Olympic teams or Olympic sports should really have their toolkit for, the NOCs and the IFs in place. And it does really speak. The document is 106 pages long. and it goes from outlining exactly what the safeguarding issues could be to potential implementation. And I do think it is time for CWI to actually begin to train individuals across the region in safeguarding and actually begin to put out their safeguarding policy as opposed to a statement in this respect.
Yeah, Dr. Armstrong, you don't sound, based on what you're saying now, to be impressed with Dr. Shallow's comment at the recent press conference when he suggested that when the issue came to his attention, back when Ricky Skerritt was president, they wrote it into the contracts of players to safeguard against things like these happening.
You can't leave safeguarding up to the players, though. The players are technically employees. Imagine you are hired by your employer and you're being harassed at work, and it's in your contract to protect yourself against being harassed. It just sounds bizarre.
So,
truthfully.
So was that the suggestion? Was that the suggestion from Dr. Shallow, though, that it is the player's responsibility to safeguard against it? I got the impression that it was a Cricket West Indies stipulation that things would be in place to guard against it.
But the thing should be in place with a safeguarding policy and a safeguarding officer. That's the thing. Is there a safeguarding officer at the point in time who is paid by Cricket West Indies to ensure that these policies are enacted? I think that's the answer that I was looking for. So to say that there is a safeguarding policy or safeguarding in a contract without actually having the policies in place that players can refer to or even receive their own training on. So this is the thing, and I thought we would have gotten to this a bit later, but if with respect to reporting, safeguarding concerns within the team, there should be a hierarchical structure. So I do know that there are sports psychologists who are assigned to work with CWI's teams. And the truth is that the psychologist has a lot more one-to-one contact with the players. At no point in time did this player disclose to the sports psychologist who travel with the team. Obviously, we don't know that the manager knew, but I'm wondering if the player did not disclose it to the press, was this something that would have come to the forefront of the discourse at this time, or was it something that would have been kept hidden? So the thing is, having a fixed safeguarding policy, what it does, it not only protects the players, but it protects the organization as well from potential lawsuits, as I would have stated. It protects the organization, from reputational damage, because the truth is, it is quite damaging, and I think your colleague hinted to it much earlier. The stigma around the sport is just not one that is actually gonna increase participation. Participation in the women's sport, the women's version of the game is already low. If we are indeed developing cricket at the grassroots level, and again, this is where I challenge the administration, when they're speaking about the things that are being put in place, if the women aren't coming out to participate in the sport, and our female cricketers are aging and they're getting older, how then do we contribute to future development if girls aren't playing? Yeah. So I just want the organization to put out their safeguarding policy. I want them to name the safeguarding officer. I think that it needs to be answered no. Was it disclosed to the psychologist at the point in time that there was abuse being perpetuated? It was really the psychologist's responsibility, perhaps, liaising with the manager to raise these concerns. And if the sports psychologist is trained and bound by an ethical code of conduct with respect to disclosure, there should have been more advocacy for the athlete at that point in time. So I am also calling the profession into account, because there is a certain level of work and a certain procedure that should have been followed at that point in time of the reporting.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable to be having this discussion now based on the timeline, especially since the girls are now in Pakistan getting ready to play some important World Cup qualifiers within a week from now. But Dr. Armstrong, I want to ask you this, because it was said that the possibility of unwanted sexual advances were happening and possibly still are in the setup. From your association with the game and your knowledge of what's happening, would you say that it is?
I would say I'm just not involved in it, to be perfectly honest. As I stated at the onset, I've been very firm in the way that I am and my orientation and what I what's the word? Because we're not trying to be stereotypical in any way. What I will say is that I guarded myself against any of the things that have been alleged over the last few weeks. as I stated, my abuse has been much more emotional in that regard. And I do hope that young women in time even feel inclined to reach out to me if they feel as if they require that psychological support as well.
Yeah. We're almost out of time, Doc, but I have one last one for you. During your association with the game, did you see or hear of situations where players might have been harassed sexually or assaulted sexually? And I ask that question because I note you just said that you guarded yourself against those things.
I think what I will say is that I have always been very vocal about certain things. Whether people listen to that voice and press ahead with dealing with and remedying these situations within the sport, I can't say that that was done. No.
Doc, thank you so much for joining us on the SportsMax Zone. It's been a pleasure listening to you articulate some of the issues within the women's game relating to this specific topic of harassment. And I think a lot of us have learned a new word today, otherness, and how that can impact an individual within any setup. Take care, and hopefully we'll be chatting again.
Yes, thanks. Have a good evening. Thank you, bye.
Yeah, Dr. Dawn Marie Armstrong, former Barbados cricketer, psychologist now, and it was great listening to her. Let's go to a break. A lot more to come on the SportsMax Zone.